Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Today is July 18th, 2021, and welcome again to Wall Street to Bay Street Sunday Chai with Sharia Portfolio, where we talk about the market happenings. My name is Nadeem Mia.
And my name is Shamil. You get your chai ready and let's get right into it and kind of see how the market's been doing. Just to start off, a quick recap for the week. The TSX is down 1.29% for the week. The S&P 500 down 1.19%. The Dow Jones down 0.88%, and the NASDAQ was down 1.86%. So a pretty tough week overall for the markets. And, that kind of leads me to my first question, Nadeem. What were the, best performing and worst performing sectors over the last week?
Yeah, sure, Shamil. I mean, obviously it was a rough week for the market. Most sectors were down. But if we just kind of take a look at some of the sector ETFs that were out there, for example, the select sector SPDR ETFs, we realized that utilities had a good week. It was up about 2.7%. Consumer staples was also up about 1.4%, and real estate up just under 1% at 7.4. So generally speaking, these are defensive sectors, utilities, consumer staples especially, and that kind of set the tone for the market, because the worst performing sectors were sectors such as information technology, like tech, which is the largest component of the market, industrials, financials, materials, consumer discretionaries. All of these sectors were down, over 1%. And the worst performing sector for the week was energy, which was the XLE, for example, which is the ETF that has a basket of the largest energy stocks, was down close to 7% for the week.
Awesome. And, one of the big questions we've been getting is, the Delta variant has been, in the news quite a bit. So, can you tell us a little more about what's going on with that and, what that might be impacting?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the market was focused once again on the COVID headline and the Delta variant. We've seen a small little spike up in the number of cases, in the US and really around the world. In terms of this variant, this Delta variant, that's leading to an uptick in new cases, an uptick to some hospitalization rates and death rates. What the medical experts are kind of telling us is that most of those that have been infected by the new variant are actually, most of them are unvaccinated. So it was something that was a cause of concern, but I would say that, nothing too drastic. And of course, the last time we had any type of an uptick, we saw lockdowns and stuff like that. And obviously the markets and the economies don't like lockdowns.
Perfect. And, kind of transitioning from that, we did have some news we did have some news this week in terms of, the consumer sentiment numbers coming out and the retail numbers. So maybe can you elaborate a little more on that as well?
Sure. So, I mean, two sentiment. Well, first, a consumer sentiment index, which is measured by a University of Michigan consumer sentiment index, that came out this week, and it came out at 80.4 for the first half of July, and that was down from the previous month of 85.5. Now, this was worse than what the economists were expecting, and this is more of a forward-looking index where it kind of gauges the surveys the U.S. consumers in terms of what they expect going forward. And so the report, which was released on Friday, did show that inflation expectations rising was, I guess you could say, some cause of concern and might have led to the drop in the index. Whereas also on Friday, some U.S. retail consumer retail numbers came out, and they were actually better than expected. But that's a number that is more of a laggard, and it's kind of measured what's happened, not necessarily what's going to happen going forward. But for what it's worth, the retail sales numbers for the U.S. were stronger than expected, and it did at least point to the fact that U.S. consumers did do spending over the past month.
Perfect. And the next thing we have on the agenda is everyone's favorite topic, and it's probably the hottest topic of the year, and that's inflation. So could you maybe talk a little more about kind of what's going on with that, or any news that's come up in that?
Sure. Yeah. The market was held back by some inflation fears. where basically the consumer price index showed an increase of 5.4% in June from a year ago. That was the fastest pace in 13 years. And, it goes back to the whole, argument of, is this, transitory, or is this something that's going to, continue more perpetual? But nonetheless, I mean, it was something that, the market did pay attention to, it didn't, it's, I don't think this headline is necessarily going to be going away until we get some stabilization. But the number was higher than what some of the economists had expected, and it's one of those things that is going to continue to weigh in on the market as we go forward.
Perfect. And the last thing is, energy had a really tough week. Could you maybe elaborate a little more on that as well?
Yeah, sure. I mean, energy stocks have been, one of the hottest sectors in 2021. However, this week alone, the XLE, which is an ETF composed of some of the largest, energy companies, was down it was down 2% today on Friday, but for the week it was down about close to 7%. And so that is, from its high, it is in correction territory, meaning it is down, about over 10% for the year from its high, I should say, sorry. So, generally speaking, a lot of some of the news was also centered around the fact that OPEC did come to some type of an agreement. And so they did come to some resolution as far as an increase in the supply. But nonetheless, I think it was something, some of the other macro events that I just mentioned, the Delta variant, consumer sentiment, that also may have contributed to, energy stocks pulling back.
Perfect. So that's pretty much all we had on the agenda this week. So thank you so much for joining. Thank you for listening as usual. And for those celebrating Eid Mubarak, from myself, Nadim, and all of Sharia Portfolio Canada. And if you do have any other questions, feel free to leave them in the comments section below. And as always, we'll hope to see you guys next week.
Thank you. Eid Mubarak, everyone. Assalamu
Nadim Mian, Portfolio Manager, registered as an advising representative, and Shamil Devji, Financial Advisor, registered as a dealing representative with Sharia Portfolio Canada Inc., a portfolio manager registered in the provinces of Ontario, British Columbia, and Alberta. Their opinions and statements expressed in this show are their personal opinions and do not necessarily reflect those of Sharia Portfolio. They are effective as of the date of this broadcast only and are subject to change. This discussion is for general information purposes only and is not investment advice.